Single dad helped an injured tourist with CPR. The next day, he found himself on a private jet. The rain came in sideways, needling through Jack Monroe's hoodie like it was paper. Seattle was unforgiving in March, cold, wet, and gray as the steel beams he spent his days working under. With his daughter Ellie nestled on his shoulder, her breath warm against his neck, he trudged across the slick pavement of Pioneer Square. She was asleep, her arms limp, soaked strands of hair stuck to her cheek. Jack held her tighter and ducked under the glow of a half-lit donut shop sign. He fished out the last $5 bill from his wallet. One maple bar, he told the vendor, forcing a smile. And if you've got a napkin, we'd appreciate it. The vendor gave him a look, half pity, half curiosity, but handed over the donut and a handful of napkins without a word. Jack thanked him and turned toward the bench under the awning, hoping to let Ellie rest a few more minutes before walking home. That was when he heard the scream. It cut through the rain like glass-sharp panicked female. He spun around. A crowd was gathering near the old bronze statue at the center of the square. People leaned in, gasped, pulled out phones. Jack's instincts kicked in. He knelt and whispered to Ellie, still half asleep in his arms. "Stay here, baby. Sit on the bench and don't move. Daddy's just checking something." The bench was barely dry under the awning, but she nodded and curled up with the donut in her lap, too tired to argue. Jack jogged across the square water, sloshing in his boots. As he pushed through the wall of bystanders, the scene came into focus. A young woman, late 20s or early 30s, lay on the ground, her eyes wide open and unblinking. Her lips were blue. "Does anyone know CPR?" someone shouted. "I think she's having a seizure." No pulse," a man yelled, fumbling with his phone. "Call 911, signal's dead out here." Another barked. Storm knocked out half the towers. Jack's heart pounded. He knelt beside the woman, brushing a strand of soaked hair from her face. She was beautiful in an elegant, timeless way, like she didn't belong on a sidewalk in the rain. But she wasn't breathing. And she had no pulse. "I'm trained," he said sharply. "Step back. Who the hell are you?" a man in a tailored coat snapped. Jack didn't answer. He locked his hands together, fingers laced arms straight, and started compressions. 1, 2, 3, 30. He tilted her head, pinched her nose, and breathed into her mouth. Again. Again. "Come on," he muttered, teeth clenched. "Come on, stay with me." Someone tried to pull him back. "You're not a doctor." "Get your hands off me." Jack barked, eyes blazing. "She's dying." The crowd went quiet. The only sound was the steady rhythm of Jack's hands pounding on her chest and the soft pitter-patter of rain against umbrellas. Minutes passed like hours. His arms burned. His jeans were soaked through. His knees scraped on the pavement. Still he pushed. Then a sound. A shallow, raspy cough. Her chest rose. Gasps echoed around them. Jack froze as the woman's lips parted. Her fingers twitched. She blinked, dazed, and whispered something in a breathy accent barely audible over the rain. "S'il vous plaît?" Jack leaned in. "You're okay. You're safe now. Stay with me." Her eyes rolled back. She passed out again, but she was breathing. A woman with a medical kit finally arrived, pushing through the crowd. "Paramedic. Off duty. Let me in." Jack moved aside, hands trembling. He glanced toward the bench. Ellie was still there, watching from under the awning, clutching the donut like a lifeline. Their eyes met. She smiled at him, that sleepy kind of smile that only children can give. The kind that said, "I knew you could do it." Daddy. Jack felt his chest tighten. Not from the CPR, from something else. Something ancient and raw and wordless. The paramedic took over. Sirens wailed in the distance. The crowd began to break apart, some murmuring praise, others glancing back at Jack like he was an alien dropped into their world. He stood up, legs unsteady, water streaming from his clothes. The man in the tailored coat who had tried to stop him avoided his eyes. Jack said nothing. He turned, walked back across the square, and picked up Ellie in his arms. "You okay, sweetheart?" She nodded against his shoulder. "Is she gonna be okay too?" "I hope so." he whispered, pressing a kiss to her damp forehead. They walked into the rain, disappearing into the misty streets of the city. Behind them, the woman on the ground was being lifted onto a stretcher, a mask pressed to her face. Her life returned one breath, one miracle. And Jack didn't know her name, didn't want thanks. He didn't even realize yet that this was the moment, this small, unnoticed moment that would change his life forever. Not because he saved someone, but because someone, somewhere, had seen him, and they would not forget. The morning after the rainstorm, Jack Monroe's one-bedroom apartment smelled faintly of wet socks and yesterday's coffee. The old space heater groaned in the corner like it had arthritis, doing its best to warm the cracked linoleum floors and peeling wallpaper. Jack sat at the chipped kitchen table spreading peanut butter on 2 slices of slightly stale bread for Ellie's breakfast. She sat cross-legged in her pajamas, her tiny fingers drawing swirls in the condensation on the window. Her hair was a wild halo and her voice was a quiet murmur. "Did she make it?" she asked, not looking at him. Jack paused, the knife hovering mid-air. "I think so," he said softly. "She was breathing when they took her away." Ellie nodded, lips pressed together. "Then, you were so brave." Jack gave a tired smile. "Nah, I just remembered what to do, that's all." He didn't tell her that he hadn't slept, that all night his mind had replayed the moment her chest moved again. He could still feel the resistance of her ribs beneath his palms, the terrifying weight of a life slipping away in his hands, and he still had no idea who she was. After Ellie was dressed and dropped off at school, her purple backpack bouncing behind her, Jack went to his part-time repair job at Doris Langley's place down the block. Doris was 92, sharp-tongued and sharper-eyed, and lived alone with 3 cats named after U.S. presidents. When he finished rewiring her thermostat and refused the extra $20 she tried to sneak into his tool bag, she squinted at him and muttered, "That girl who collapsed downtown. That was you, wasn't it?" Jack froze. "Ma'am," she pointed her cane at the small box television on the counter. "Saw it on the morning news. They blurred your face, but I know that posture. That's the way you bend when you lift Ellie." Jack scratched the back of his neck. "I didn't do much. You saved a life, boy. You did everything." He left her house with a bag of day-old muffins and a heart strangely heavier than when he arrived. It wasn't guilt, and it wasn't pride. It was something in between. The discomfort of having done something right in a world where right things were too often ignored. Back home, he dropped the tool bag by the door and kicked off his boots. That's when he noticed the sleek black car idling outside his building. It didn't belong in this neighborhood. The paint gleamed like glass. The rims were spotless. And the woman who stepped out of the back seat, tall-striking, dressed in a navy suit that probably cost more than Jack's monthly rent, definitely didn't belong here either. She glanced down at a small notepad, then up at his window with precise certainty. Jack's stomach tightened. A moment later, someone knocked on the door. He opened it cautiously. "Mr. Jack Monroe," the woman asked, her tone firm but polite. "Yes, my name is Mira Talbot. I'm the personal liaison for Camille Durand." Jack blinked. "I don't know that name." She tilted her head. "You saved her life yesterday." His heart skipped. "The woman from the square." "Yes. Miss Durand asked me to find you. She would like to see you personally, to thank you." Jack rubbed a hand down his face. "I appreciate that, but I didn't do it for thanks. She insists. I'm not exactly the tuxedo and caviar type. She's not inviting you to a gala, Mr. Monroe. She simply wants a conversation." Behind him, Ellie's voice floated out from the hallway. "Daddy, who's that?" Jack looked down at her, still in her school shoes, now gripping the doorframe with both hands. Mira knelt slightly, her tone softening. "Hello, Ellie. I heard your dad is a hero." Ellie beamed. Jack sighed. Where exactly would this conversation take place? Mira didn't blink. "You'd be escorted to a private airfield nearby. Miss Durand is currently resting at her Aspen property. She'd like to fly you both there, just for a day or two." He stared at her. A private jet. Yes. Jack laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so far from his reality that it felt like fiction. Look, I'm a guy who fixes broken heaters and eats leftover peanut butter sandwiches. I don't fly to Aspen. Mira remained composed. Miss Durand is not offering a vacation. She's offering her gratitude. She woke up because of you. You changed the course of her life. She would simply like to speak with the man who refused to walk away. Ellie tugged at his sleeve. Daddy. Maybe she's the angel you saved. That stopped him cold. He looked from Ellie's hopeful eyes to Mira's calm gaze. Finally, he muttered, How soon? Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. He hesitated, then nodded. I'll arrange everything Mira said. Clothing, accommodations, food. Just bring yourselves. She handed him a small envelope before leaving. Inside a flight itinerary, a handwritten note that simply read, For the man who reminded me what breath feels like. Camille. That night, after Ellie fell asleep, curled up beside him on the couch, Jack stood by the window staring down at the street where the black car had been. He wasn't ready for this, but something deep in his gut whispered, Go. Not for the luxury, not for the mystery, but because sometimes life knocks once, and if you're lucky enough to answer, it might just change everything. The sun hadn't yet broken the horizon when Jack tightened Ellie's jacket zipper and stepped out into the cold hush of early morning. Fog clung low to the sidewalks like reluctant dreams. The limo waited at the curb, same gleaming black paint, same silent driver in a suit that didn't wrinkle. Ellie clutched her worn pink backpack and looked up at her father, sleepy but excited. Do you think they'll have snacks on the plane? Jack smiled, brushing a lock of hair from her cheek. Probably fancier ones than we're used to. She grinned, and the driver opened the door without a word. They rode in silence through the still-sleeping city. Jack watched the familiar streets blur into highways and then into open space. Everything outside looked the same, but inside him something stirred uneasily. Not fear, not hope, something unfamiliar. A ripple. When they reached the private airstrip, Jack half expected armed guards and flashing lights, but what he saw instead was a sleek silver jet parked beside a glass terminal glowing softly in the dawn light. It was quiet, polished, untouched by chaos. Mira Talbot met them at the entrance, clipboard in hand, composed as ever. Good morning, Mr. Monroe. Miss Ellie. Ellie offered a sleepy wave. Jack nodded, clutching his duffel bag like armor. Mira led them to the base of the stairs. You'll be the only passengers. The flight to Aspen will take just under 2 hours. Only passengers? Jack asked, eyebrows rising. Mira gave a small professional smile. Miss Durand prefers privacy. At the top of the steps, a flight attendant with a smooth French accent welcomed them aboard. The interior was nothing like Jack imagined. It wasn't golden or gaudy. It was quiet elegance. Cream leather seats, warm lighting, a single vase of white tulips on a central table. Simple, tasteful. Jack helped Ellie settle into a seat beside the window. She pressed her nose against the glass, immediately marveling at everything. He sat across from her, trying to appear unfazed, but his boots felt too big, his jacket too worn, his presence too loud in this cocoon of wealth. Half an hour into the flight, Jack was staring absently out the window when a voice from behind said softly, May I? He turned. The woman from the square stood at the end of the aisle, but this time she was standing under her own strength. Her skin, though still pale, glowed with life. Her eyes, hazel laced with amber, met his with an intensity that made him forget to stand. Camille Durand was not what he expected. She wore a simple cashmere sweater, gray slacks, and no makeup except for the slight gloss on her lips. There was a faint bandage on her neck just above the collarbone. Vulnerability lingered in her frame, but not weakness. Jack stood belatedly, reaching out his hand awkwardly. Jack Monroe. She ignored the handshake and stepped forward and then did something Jack never anticipated. She hugged him. Soft, tentative, brief, but real. I wasn't breathing, she said, her voice low. And then, I was. Because of you. Jack cleared his throat, trying not to crumble under the strange weight of her sincerity. I just did what anyone would have done. No, Camille said firmly. Most people stood and watched. You moved. She sat down across from him. Ellie peeked over the seat wide-eyed. Camille noticed. And this must be your daughter. Ellie smiled shyly. I'm Ellie. Camille leaned forward a little. Thank you for sharing your dad with me. Ellie blinked. I didn't share. He ran. Jack laughed. Camille did too. For a moment it felt normal. Then Camille's eyes darkened slightly. I owe you more than a thank you, Jack. You don't owe me anything. I disagree. She looked out the window briefly as if gathering something heavy from inside herself. I was traveling alone on purpose, she said quietly. I wanted anonymity. Escape. I'd been betrayed. By someone close. I didn't trust anyone. I was, numb. Jack nodded, slowly listening. I walked into that square without caring much if I walked out, she admitted, then turned back to him. But you didn't see a headline. Or a fortune. You saw a person. You acted like I mattered. Jack shifted in his seat. You do matter. Camille tilted her head. Do you always talk like that? Like people are worth saving even when they're broken? Jack looked at Ellie, then back at her. Only because I've been broken too. There was a long pause. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was full. Would you consider coming to Aspen for a day or two? Camille asked. There's a charity retreat happening this weekend. Quiet, private. I'm hosting. I'd like to invite you both. Not as a guest of honor, just as a guest. Jack raised an eyebrow. Why? She hesitated. Then, softly, because I want to spend time around someone who didn't ask who I was before helping me. That's rare. He hesitated. Then Ellie chimed in, utterly unaware of the tension. Do they have hot chocolate in Aspen? Camille smiled. The best. Jack exhaled. All right, one weekend. But we're not wearing tuxedos. Deal. She stood, nodded graciously, and stepped toward the cockpit. But just before she left, she turned back. Jack, she said. Yeah, I don't remember much from those few minutes, but I remember your voice. It pulled me back. Then she disappeared down the aisle, and Jack sat still, the hum of the jet surrounding him like a second heartbeat. He didn't know why the universe had picked him. But in that moment, something shifted. He wasn't just a single dad anymore. He was part of a story much bigger than he'd planned for. And it had only just begun. The snow-dusted peaks of Aspen rose like quiet gods above the horizon as the jet descended. Ellie pressed her face against the window, awestruck by the white canvas below. It looks like a painting, she whispered. Jack smiled but said nothing. His gaze wasn't on the mountains. It was on the woman seated across the aisle, Camille Durand, who had gone back to reading quietly, one hand absently touching the faint bandage on her neck. There was a kind of grace in her stillness, but something underneath, something haunted. When they landed, another black car waited at the edge of a private runway that looked more like a luxury resort driveway than any airport Jack had seen. The driver opened the doors wordlessly, and within minutes they were weaving through groves of fir trees dusted in snow, the roads winding higher into the Colorado hills. Camille's estate emerged like a mirage wood, glass and stone, seamlessly embedded into the mountainside. Warm lights glowed from within, casting long amber lines across the snow. A small group of people in elegant winter coats waited at the entrance, talking quietly beneath outdoor heaters. Jack stepped out of the car boots, crunching on packed snow. Ellie's mittened hand wrapped around his. The air smelled of pine and firewood. Camille turned to them. You're not expected to mingle unless you want to. This weekend isn't about speeches. It's about connection. Jack gave her a wary smile. I'm better with tools than with wine glasses. She laughed lightly. There's a maintenance shed, if it'll help you feel grounded. Inside, the house was even more breathtaking. High ceilings, fireplace the size of a small garage, wide windows that looked out over valleys blanketed in snow. The place exhaled warmth, not just the heat of the rooms, but the kind that came from intention from a life that had once been full. Camille led them to their rooms, a cozy suite connected to Ellie's with a hallway door. There were fresh linens, chocolate mints on the pillows, and a handwritten note for Ellie that simply said, "Welcome to your adventure." Jack read it twice. He wasn't used to this kind of thoughtfulness, especially not from strangers. Later that evening, a soft knock came at his door. Camille stood there in a thick, cream-colored sweater, her hair loose over her shoulders, looking younger than before. "Come sit by the fire," she asked. Jack glanced toward Ellie, already asleep beneath a pile of stuffed animals, then followed Camille down the quiet hallway. The main living room was nearly empty now, the guests having moved to other corners of the estate. Only the fire crackled. They sat on the floor backs against a couch, the fire warming their faces. "Do you miss her?" Camille asked softly. Jack blinked. "Who? Your wife? Ellie's mom?" He took a breath. It wasn't a question he got asked often, not anymore. Every day he said finally. She had lupus, diagnosed late. We couldn't afford the treatments right away. By the time we found the right specialist, it was too late. Camille was quiet. Jack stared into the fire. Ellie was only 3. She barely remembers her, but sometimes she'll hum one of the lullabies Lydia used to sing. I don't know if she remembers the song, or just the feeling. Camille's voice was barely audible. That's what I was missing, I think. The feeling. Jack turned. She was staring into the flame's eyes, distant. "You said someone betrayed you," he said gently. "What happened?" Camille hesitated, then spoke slowly. "I was engaged to one of our foundation's attorneys. I thought I was building something with someone who saw me. Not the company, not the wealth, just me." She shook her head. "Turns out he was building something too, an offshore account, a cover story, and an exit plan with my former assistant." Jack didn't speak. He knew the wound was still raw. I stepped down from the board for a while, told the press it was stress, told myself it was strategy. Her laugh was bitter. I didn't trust anyone, didn't even trust myself. I went to Seattle under an alias trying to feel invisible again. "And then you collapsed," Jack said softly. Camille looked at him. "And then I woke up." To a stranger pounding life back into my chest. And when I opened my eyes, the first face I saw wasn't panicked. It was steady. It was yours. They sat in silence for a long time. Outside the windows, snow began to fall gently. "You're not invisible," Jack said after a while. "Not to people who see past the noise." She turned to him. "And you're not small. You think you are, but you're not." Their eyes locked, nothing romantic yet, but something was taking root. A recognition, a quiet ache to be seen. Understood. Camille exhaled. "Would you stay for the gala tomorrow night?" Jack smirked. "I didn't bring anything fancier than jeans." She smiled. "Then it'll be the best-dressed pair of jeans Aspen's ever seen." They sat by the fire a little longer, letting silence speak for them both. It wasn't awkward. It was healing. And somewhere down the hallway, Ellie stirred in her sleep, the smallest smile curling on her lips. As if she already sensed the truth her father hadn't yet dared to name. Sometimes it takes nearly losing everything to find what matters most. And sometimes the people who walk into your life when you're at your lowest are the ones sent to lift you the highest. Morning in Aspen arrived like a held breath, still pale gold quiet. Snow sparkled on the balconies and steam rose from the outdoor hot tubs nestled between fir trees. It should have been peaceful, but Jack Monroe felt anything but peace. He stood at the breakfast nook in Camille's sprawling kitchen phone in one hand, brow furrowed. Ellie sat nearby, munching on a croissant, swinging her legs and humming softly. The view outside looked like a postcard. The view on Jack's screen looked like a storm. Mystery Man, on Camille Durand's jet from mechanic to mansion. Cinderella, flip. Single dad saves heiress. Wins a weekend in Aspen hero or hustler who is Jack Monroe. The tabloids had found him. Camille walked in moments later, fresh from a morning run, cheeks flushed, hair pulled into a ponytail. She caught the look on his face before he even spoke. "Jack," she asked gently. He turned the screen toward her. Her smile faded. For a second, she said nothing. Then she reached for the phone, scrolled with clinical precision, and exhaled sharply. "I should have anticipated this," she murmured. They were quiet after the accident. But a jet, a single dad, it's the perfect clickbait storm. Jack folded his arms, trying to keep the anger out of his voice. "They found out where Ellie goes to school. There's a photo of her and me from 3 months ago leaving the grocery store." Camille paled. "I'm so sorry, Jack. I never meant for you or Ellie to become targets." "I didn't ask for any of this," Jack said. "I didn't save your life for attention or headlines. I know you didn't. Well, now I'm the mystery man. A handyman with a kid suddenly flown into the lap of luxury like some charity case. That's not how I see you, but it's how they see me, and how they'll see her." He nodded toward Ellie, who looked up with a mouthful of pastry, blissfully unaware. Camille crossed the room and spoke lower, calmer. "We can fix this. I'll call my PR team. We'll issue a clarification. Remove names, blur faces, whatever you want." Jack's jaw clenched. "I want my daughter to be left alone. That's what I want. You have my word. I'll make sure of it." He hesitated. "Maybe we should go, before it gets worse." But Camille stepped closer, her voice urgent now. "Please, don't let them scare you away from something good." He blinked. "What is this, Camille?" Her eyes softened. "Something rare." Before he could respond, Mira appeared at the entryway with a tablet in hand and a grave expression. "Camille," she said carefully, the stories spreading faster than expected. "3 national outlets have picked it up. Your name is trending. So is Jack's. And Ellie's first name was mentioned in one segment." Jack's hands curled into fists. "I'm pulling the story down," Camille said instantly. "I'll throw the lawyers at them." Mira hesitated. "There's another option. A press statement. Your voice. Get ahead of the narrative. Frame it the right way." Jack shook his head. "I didn't come here for interviews." Camille turned to him, quiet but firm. "I can handle this, but you need to trust me." He studied her. She wasn't the woman from the sidewalk anymore. She was standing strong, spine, straight eyes, clear not just as someone saved, but as someone trying to protect. And for the first time since yesterday, Jack didn't feel powerless. "I trust you," he said finally. Camille nodded once, then turned to Mira. "Schedule a controlled interview. No tabloids. Someone reputable." Mira gave a brisk nod and left the room. Ellie wandered over and tugged at Jack's shirt. "Are you mad, Daddy?" He knelt beside her. "No, sweetheart. I'm just tired of people talking like they know us." She tilted her head. "But they don't know that you sang me lullabies every night when Mommy went to heaven, or that you fixed our heater with a spoon." Jack blinked, caught between a smile and a tear. "You're right," he said. "They don't. Then maybe we tell them the good stuff." He looked up at Camille. She'd heard it too, and maybe that was the turning point. That evening, a small gathering was held in Camille's main lodge, an informal fireside event meant for her inner circle of donors, volunteers, and board members of the Durand Foundation. No cameras, just people. Jack stayed on the sidelines holding a mug of coffee, Ellie leaning sleepily against his leg. He felt like a barn cat in a room full of show dogs. Then a familiar voice rose above the low murmurs. "And I'd like to introduce someone most of you don't know, though the press thinks they do." Camille stood beside the fire, radiant in a simple black sweater dress, no notes in hand, no podium. "This is Jack Monroe. He's a single father. He works hard. He gives more than he has. And last week he saved my life, not because he recognized my name, but because he saw a human being in need. And he acted." The room grew still. Camille continued, her voice steady. "The headlines got one thing right. He is a hero. But not because of CPR. Because of how he lives. With humility. With heart. And with a child who thinks the world of him." Ellie beamed. Jack wanted to sink into the floor. But then came the applause, genuine, not polite. Camille turned toward him, her voice quieter now. "I don't care how they frame the story. This is the version I believe in, and it's the only one that matters." Jack didn't know what to say, but in his chest, where the weight of years had settled like stone, something cracked, and something hopeful started to breathe. The snow kept falling overnight, silent and endless, blanketing the estate in a hush that felt sacred. But inside Jack Monroe's chest a storm brewed quietly tight, uncertain and unresolved. He stood in front of the guest room mirror, tugging awkwardly at the sleeves of the navy sport coat Camille's assistant had left for him. The tag still clung to the inner seam. The shirt underneath fit fine, but the reflection looking back at him didn't feel like him. It felt like a borrowed costume for a role he hadn't auditioned for. Ellie peeked into the room, her braid slightly crooked, wearing a simple white dress with a velvet ribbon tied at the waist. "Daddy, she said you look like the principal from school." "But younger." Jack chuckled, loosening the collar. "Is that a compliment?" She nodded solemnly. "You look kind of important." "Kind of." That was the part that stuck. By the time the gala began, the house had transformed. Dozens of guests filled the grand hall, philanthropists, doctors, educators, artists, all mingling with glasses of wine and murmured applause. String music played softly near the stone hearth. Ellie was already curled on a settee with a book under the care of Mira, who doted on her like a favorite aunt. Jack stuck to the edges of the room, nursing a ginger ale. The conversations around him floated like foreign currency grants, innovation, mergers, legacies. Words he rarely used. Lives he didn't recognize. Camille arrived late, descending the staircase in a floor-length gown the color of storm clouds, satin, and silent. She moved with the grace of someone born to this world, but when her eyes found Jack's, something softened. She crossed the room toward him, ignoring the glances that followed. "You clean up well," she said. Jack smirked. "I had help." They stood together for a moment, watching the event swirl around them like a snow globe someone had just shaken. And then came the voice. "Well, well, the man of the hour." Jack turned to see a tall, sharp-featured man in a tuxedo approach, grin. Too wide, handshake, too eager. "Marcus Ashford," he said. "PR consultant, also occasional cynic." Jack took his hand reluctantly. "Jack Monroe." Marcus leaned closer. "Between us, you've got one hell of a redemption arc. Blue-collar dad meets heiress. It's practically Oscar bait." Jack froze. "Excuse me." Marcus winked. "Oh, don't worry. They'll eat it up. I mean, I can already hear the podcast titles, The Man Who Fixed the Furnace and Her Heart." Camille's eyes narrowed. "That's enough, Marcus." But the man wasn't done. "Tell me, did the producers already call? Or are we still waiting for the bidding war?" Jack's voice came low and cold. "You don't know me." Marcus raised his hands mockingly. "Whoa, touchy." Jack stepped back. "I need air." He left the room without another word, pushing past waitstaff and murmurs. He found the terrace door and stepped outside, where the mountain air hit him like a wave. Sharp, clean, real. The snow had eased into flurries. Below, Aspen twinkled like a jewel against the dark hills. Jack leaned on the railing, jaw tight. The words echoed redemption arc. Podcast. Oscar bait. He hadn't come here for any of that. Jack Camille's voice came behind him. He didn't turn around. "I'm sorry about him," she said softly. "Marcus works with one of the corporate donors. He has a habit of weaponizing charm." Jack stayed quiet. She stepped beside him. "You're not a character, Jack. And this isn't a fairy tale." "I know that." Jack shook his head. "I don't belong here." "Yes, you do." "No," he said, turning now. "You say that, but look at what happens the second someone like me walks into your world. I become a headline, a punchline. I get dissected, judged. You saved my life. That's not enough to make me fit in." "You don't have to fit in," she said, voice rising. "You just have to be here. With me. With Ellie." Jack's eyes darkened. "You think this is about Ellie?" Camille took a breath. "Isn't it? You've kept the world at arm's length because of her. Because you think if anything good touches your life, it'll disappear. Like her mother did." That hit hard. Jack stared at her. Camille's voice broke. "You saved me, Jack. But you won't let anyone save you." He looked away, chest tight. "I can't afford another loss. I have a daughter who already lost her mother. She doesn't need a fairy tale. She needs consistency, reality. And reality is," Camille said gently, stepping closer, "that people like me can bleed, can fall, can be pulled back into life by a man who smells like engine grease and sings lullabies off-key. I don't want a savior. I want someone who chooses to stay." He looked at her now, really looked, the rawness in her voice, the earnest plea in her posture. Jack swallowed. "I don't know how to be part of your world. Then let's build one that belongs to both of us." Silence stretched, and in that silence a bridge began to form. Jack closed his eyes. The wind tugged gently at his coat, and then he nodded just once. Camille exhaled almost in relief. Inside, the music continued. But outside, beneath the stars and snow, something had shifted. They weren't strangers anymore. They were survivors. And perhaps, if the world could be cruel enough to bring them both to the edge, it could also be kind enough to give them somewhere to land. The next morning, the house was quiet in that gentle way all big places are when the crowd has thinned and only the heartbeat remains. Most of the guests had already left. The gala was over, the snow was melting under a weak Colorado sun, and Jack Monroe stood in the library holding a cup of coffee he hadn't yet touched. The fire crackled beside him. His eyes traced the spines of books he hadn't read and probably never would. Titles about art philosophy, global health. None of them had anything to do with fixing things, and that's what he knew, how to fix what was broken. What he didn't know was how to fix this quiet ache inside him. The door creaked open. Ellie stepped in, her face unusually serious, hugging a stuffed rabbit against her chest. Jack immediately straightened. "Hey, Peanut, you okay?" She hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." She crossed the room slowly and climbed into the leather chair beside his. "Are we poor?" The question landed like a rock in his chest. He blinked. "What I heard the fancy man at the party, the one with the bow tie, he said we didn't belong here, that we were charity." Jack set his coffee down. "Ellie, is that true?" Her voice didn't waver, but her hands gripped the rabbit a little tighter. He crouched beside her, steady and calm, the way he always did when she had big feelings she didn't know where to put. "Listen to me," he said. "We don't have a lot of money. That part's true, but we have a lot of things that matter more, like kindness, like courage, like love." Her lip trembled. "Then why do people act like we're less than them?" Jack exhaled. "Because they've forgotten what really matters." Ellie looked at him with eyes that had always been a little older than her years. "Mom never cared about money, did she?" Jack smiled faintly. "No. Your mom loved gardenias, rainy days, and old love songs. She cared about the way people made her feel." Ellie leaned her head on his shoulder. "I remember her a little, but I remember you more." He closed his eyes. "You work so hard," she said softly. "You don't get new things. You don't sleep much. But you always sing to me. You always say yes when I ask for an extra bedtime story. You always stay." Jack couldn't speak. And I don't want you to think I need someone like Camille to fix our lives, Ellie continued. You already fix things, Daddy. You fix hearts. Jack's throat tightened, a lump forming he couldn't swallow down. She's nice, Ellie added quickly. I like her. She listens, and she smells like vanilla and flowers. Jack chuckled through the ache. But even if she goes away one day, Ellie said, I just want you to be happy again. You've been lonely, even when you smile. That shattered him. Not in a way that broke him, but in the way a frozen lake breaks when spring finally comes. He pulled her into a hug and held her tightly, one hand cupping the back of her head. I'm not lonely with you, he whispered. I know, she said, but you don't always let people help. You should. Later that afternoon, Jack found Camille on the back patio, bundled in a thick shawl, sipping tea and gazing out at the mountains. Her eyes tracked him as he approached, quiet and thoughtful. You look like you've been somewhere, she said. I was, he replied, inside my daughter's head. Camille smiled gently. Wise place to be. She said, I fix hearts. She's not wrong. Jack sat beside her. You know what scares me? That you'll fall for me, and I'll break you. He blinked. Well, that wasn't exactly what I was going to say. She grinned. But it's on your mind. He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. I'm not good at changing tracks. I've been on survival mode for so long I forgot what it felt like to just be, to let someone in. Camille looked down at her hands, turning her teacup slowly. I used to be surrounded by people. Meetings, applause, appearances, but no one really saw me. Not the real me. I didn't even know who that was anymore. She looked up at him. Then I collapsed in a square. Died, technically. And came back. To a man who didn't know my name but called me back anyway. Jack shook his head. I didn't save you. You came back because you wanted to live. No, Jack. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I came back because for the first time someone asked me to stay. Silence wrapped around them like a warm blanket. I'm afraid, Jack admitted. So am I, Camille replied. But fear means there's something to lose, and I think we both deserve something to hold on to. They didn't kiss, not yet, but their hands found each other's fingers, brushing, then clasping. And in that quiet moment beneath the snowy peaks and between two wounded souls, something powerful took root. Not rescue, not romance, but the slow, brave beginning of healing. That night, as Ellie drifted to sleep with the stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm and Jack humming an old lullaby, she didn't know the words to Camille, watched from the hallway, quiet, unseen. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't thinking about her inheritance or legacy or the headlines. She was thinking about that little girl, and the man who never once walked away, and the terrifying, beautiful thought that maybe, just maybe, she had finally come home. The Durand Foundation's Winter Gala had always been a polished affair, crystal chandeliers, live string quartets, speeches curated to perfection. But this year, something felt different. Not because the room was less grand, it wasn't. Not because the donors were fewer, they weren't. It was different because Camille Durand had changed. She stood backstage in a quiet hallway just off the ballroom, wearing a deep emerald dress that shimmered like pine needles in moonlight. Her fingers fidgeted slightly with the edge of a note card she hadn't intended to use. Across from her, Jack waited in his modest charcoal jacket, freshly pressed by Mira's team. They weren't there for the optics anymore. They were there because something bigger was blooming between them, within them, and now maybe for the world to see. Camille turned to Jack. Are you sure you're up for this? He raised an eyebrow. You mean the speech? Or walking into a room where half the people think I'm your midlife crisis? She almost laughed, but the truth in his tone stung. That's not what they think. He glanced at the crowd visible through the curtains. Some of them do. Then let them, she said firmly. Because I know who you are. Jack paused. I'm not good at public things. She stepped closer, her voice low and calm. "Just speak like you do to Ellie. Speak like no one's watching but her." That stilled him. Mira peeked through the curtains and nodded. "It's time." Camille took a breath, then walked out first. The crowd hushed as she reached the stage. The room, bathed in gold and amber lighting, held nearly 200 people, some donors, some press, some friends. But all eyes were on her. "Good evening," she began. "Tonight you were expecting the usual recap of our foundation's milestones, grants-funded programs, launched statistics delivered with flair." She smiled lightly. "But instead, I'd like to introduce someone who represents the why behind all those numbers." She turned toward the curtain. Jack stepped out. He didn't stride or pose. He simply walked like a man who'd never expected to be on a stage, modest, calm, and real. He wore no tie. He carried no notes, just his hands in his pockets and his heart in his eyes. He looked out at the crowd, then down at Camille. She nodded once. Jack adjusted the mic, cleared his throat. "I'm not here because I belong in a room like this," he said honestly. "I'm here because one day in a city square I saw someone collapse, and I couldn't walk away." A quiet ripple moved through the audience. "I'm a single dad," he continued. "A guy who fixes broken things, mostly heaters and refrigerators, sometimes toys that have been stepped on too many times. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've missed payments. I've eaten cold soup for dinner more times than I care to count." He glanced toward where Ellie sat beside Mira, dressed in a pale blue dress, legs swinging. She smiled at him, and he smiled back. "But I've never missed a bedtime story, and I've never let my daughter go to sleep wondering if she mattered." The room was still. When Camille fell, there wasn't time to think about who she was. She wasn't a billionaire or a headline. She was just a woman who'd stopped breathing. And I did what I knew to do, not because I'm a hero, but because I couldn't imagine her daughter, if she had one, losing her like mine lost her mom. Gasps echoed. A few wiped their eyes. "I'm not good with charity galas or the right fork for salad, but I know how to hold a hand that's slipping, and I know what it means to keep showing up even when no one's clapping." He stepped back slightly, his voice quieter now. "If this foundation is about impact, then let it be about moments like that. Ordinary people. Extraordinary choices. Not just big checks, but hearts that won't walk away." He nodded, almost to himself. Then, "Thank you." The applause didn't burst like thunder. It rose like a wave, slow, growing undeniable. People stood, one by one, until the whole room was on its feet. Camille looked up at Jack, her eyes bright, her hand finding his as they stepped down together. After the speeches, the ballroom shifted into celebration. Wine glasses clinked, laughter rose, conversations bloomed with sincerity for the first time that evening. Jack found Ellie curled up in a corner of the room reading. He knelt beside her. "Hey, Peanut, how was I?" She closed the book and leaned on his shoulder. "You made people cry. That's how you know it was good." He chuckled. "That wasn't the goal." She looked up, but maybe it needed to happen. A few feet away, Camille stood surrounded by donors, but her gaze never left Jack. Later that night, when the lights dimmed and the crowd thinned, Jack and Camille stood by the massive window overlooking the moonlit forest. The music had faded to a gentle piano echo. "That was brave," she whispered. He shrugged. "I just told the truth." Camille turned to him. "Then maybe more people should start doing that." They didn't need more words. Their fingers laced naturally. And for the first time in a long time, Jack didn't feel like he was borrowing someone else's world. He felt like he was building something new, brick by brick, moment by moment. Not because of who Camille was, but because of who they could be together. And from the other side of the room, Ellie watched them with a sleepy smile, then turned back to her book. Some stories she was learning were better lived than read, and this one was just beginning. 2 days after the gala, Aspen's skies had cleared to a crisp blue, and the Durand estate felt more like a retreat center than a billionaire's home. Most guests had left, but the air still hummed with what had been stirred conversations, emotions, possibilities. And something new, unspoken, between Jack and Camille. They were in the greenhouse behind the main lodge, sunlight streaming through the glass roof, warming the scent of fresh herbs and blooming winter roses. Jack knelt in front of a wooden planter box helping Ellie repot a basil plant while Camille watched from across the bench twirling a ceramic mug in her hand. "You ever think about doing this, full-time?" Camille asked. Jack looked up. "You mean gardening?" She smiled. "No, I mean this teaching, fixing, leading." Jack leaned back on his heels. "I do fix things for a living, you know. I don't mean appliances," she said. "I mean people." He gave her a skeptical look. "I'm not a therapist." Camille set her mug down. "What if I told you I have a program in mind, something long-term real, and I want you to help build it?" Jack raised an eyebrow. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." She stood now, speaking with the clarity of someone who'd thought this through for days. "We've been talking for years about expanding our outreach to underserved communities, especially around emergency preparedness and health education. But it always felt theoretical, safe, detached. Until now." Jack stood slowly. "You're talking about CPR programs." "And more," she said. "Basic life-saving skills, first aid training, hands-on repair clinics, fatherhood workshops, everything you do naturally, instinctively passing it on." Jack stared at her. "You want me to run it? I want you to help build it," she said. "With us. With me. From the ground up." Ellie, still kneeling by the planter box, looked up. "Would we get to help kids like the ones at the shelter?" Jack paused. "Yeah, sweetie. That's the idea." Camille stepped closer. "I can fund the infrastructure. But I don't want this to be another Durand headline. I want it to feel like your legacy, too." Jack swallowed hard. "That's a lot. It's what you've already been doing. Quietly. You just didn't have a name for it." He looked down at his hands, calloused, worn, steady, then at Ellie, now gently patting soil around the new roots. And finally at Camille, eyes steady, offering not a handout, but a hand in. "What would it look like?" he asked. She lit up. "A pilot program in Seattle. You'd choose the location. We bring in volunteers, training teams, build a mobile unit eventually. We call it Every Breath Counts." Jack chuckled. "That sounds like something my daughter would come up with." Ellie clapped. "I love it." He turned back to Camille, the smile softening. "You've thought of everything." She shook her head. "Not everything, just the parts that matter." Silence settled between them, but it was warm, not awkward. Jack nodded slowly. "Let's do it." Camille blinked. "Really?" He took a breath. "It's terrifying. But maybe that's how I know it's right." That evening, they returned to the main lodge where Mira had set up a small celebratory dinner, just the three of them and a few staff who had become like family over the past week. Nothing fancy roast chicken cornbread, homemade lemonade. After dessert, Ellie got up and presented Camille with a drawing done in marker on hotel stationery. It showed a cartoon version of Jack fixing a big red heart with a wrench, Camille standing beside him with a clipboard, and Ellie handing out chocolate chip cookies to smiling kids. At the top, in big crayon letters, it read, "The Fix-It Team." Camille laughed through a tear. "I'm framing this." "You better," Ellie said proudly. "It's the first draft of our logo." They all laughed, and for a moment there was nothing complicated between them, just joy and warmth and the quiet miracle of belonging. After Ellie went to bed, Jack and Camille stepped outside, bundled in coats, leaning on the railing that overlooked the glowing slope of Aspen below. "She believes in this more than I do." Jack said, his breath visible in the cold air. "She believes in you," Camille replied. "And so do I." Jack was quiet for a long moment. "I didn't think this was possible." "What this he said? A life that doesn't feel like holding my breath all the time." She looked at him gently. "That's what this is about, isn't it? Every breath counts. It's not just about CPR. Jack nodded. It's about choosing to live, not just survive. Camille's hand found his, and this time it didn't feel uncertain. It felt earned. Later that night, Jack watched Ellie sleeping peacefully, her arms around her stuffed rabbit. He closed the door softly and turned to find Camille waiting in the hallway. "I'm scared," he said honestly. "So am I," she admitted. "But I want to try." "Then let's try." He stepped toward her, heart pounding, and kissed her gently, reverently. Not a fairy tale kiss, a real one, full of questions and hope and all the healing they still had left to do. When they finally pulled apart, Camille whispered, "You just made your first bold move as co-founder." He smiled. "I'll take it." And somewhere in the quiet corners of that Colorado night, the past softened and the future began to hum. Because every breath really did count, and some were meant to be taken together. 3 weeks later, Seattle was its usual gray self, rain glistening on sidewalks, traffic humming like a tired lullaby. But inside the modest community center in the Rainier Valley neighborhood, something new was taking root. Jack stood in the middle of a gym-turned-training space, watching as a dozen kids ages 11 to 16 practiced chest compressions on CPR mannequins. Ellie sat with a girl her age, teaching her how to count out loud. The girl had lost her brother in a bike accident the year before. She wanted to be the kind of person who could save someone. Jack's heart swelled. He hadn't felt this kind of peace in years. "First class is a success," came Camille's voice from behind him. Jack turned and grinned. She looked out of place in her tailored coat and heels, but she wore it all like armor, and these days he knew what was beneath it. The woman who'd fought back from silence, who'd traded luxury for meaning. "It's more than a success," he said. "It's the first time I've seen some of these kids smile since they walked through the door." Camille looked around. "This place matters." Jack nodded. "We've only scratched the surface. There's still a whole city out there. You know, she said we could take this model nationwide. Start with 5 cities, build a volunteer network." He chuckled. "You never think small, do you?" "Not when I see something real." Just then, Ellie ran up with a flyer in hand. "Daddy, Miss Camille. Look, they want me to help at the booth next Saturday." Jack looked down. The flyer read, "Community Preparedness Fair. Every Breath Counts Pavilion. Kid Ambassadors, welcome." Camille knelt beside her. "That's a pretty big job." Ellie's eyes sparkled. "I want to do it. I want people to know what we're building." Camille smiled. "Then you're already doing it." Jack placed a hand on Ellie's shoulder. "Go grab your things, Peanut. We're heading home soon." After she dashed off, Camille's expression softened. "She's blooming, Jack. You both are." He looked down, voice quiet. "There was a time I thought this life, this kind of joy, wasn't meant for me." Camille's eyes searched his. "Do you still believe that no?" He met her gaze. "Because you've made room for me in a world I never imagined myself entering." "You walked into it," she said. "I just left the door open." They were quiet a moment. Then Jack's phone buzzed. A message from his landlord, cold but expected new owner. "Lease not renewed. You have 30 days." He sighed and tucked the phone away. Camille noticed the change in his face. "What's wrong?" Jack hesitated. "Just life. Our apartment's being sold. I'll figure it out." Camille was quiet. "Come live here." Jack blinked. "What?" She stepped closer. "Not in Aspen. Here, I've leased a place 3 blocks from the center. Plenty of room. Quiet street, good schools." He looked at her, stunned. "You're not a project, Jack. And this isn't charity," she said. "It's life, shared, chosen. I can't just move into your world." "Then, don't," she said. "Move into ours." Jack looked away for a moment, then back to her. "I'm scared I'll lose it." Camille reached for his hand. "Then hold it tight. Let's build something no one can take." Jack stared at her, and in her eyes he didn't see pity or rescue. He saw home. That weekend, they packed what little they had. Jack's old truck groaned under the weight of boxes, but Ellie made it a game naming each box like a pet. The last one, labeled Memories, rode up front with her. Their new place wasn't grand, but it was warm, bright, the kind of space that echoed with possibility. Camille was waiting when they pulled in, holding a set of keys and a bag of takeout from the diner around the corner. That night they sat on the floor, no furniture yet, eating burgers and watching Ellie build a fort out of boxes. Camille turned to Jack. "You know, I never imagined my life looking like this." "Neither did I. But now I can't imagine it any other way." Jack leaned over and kissed her slow, certain, full of quiet fire. Ellie peeked from behind her box fort. "You," she giggled. "You guys are weird." Camille laughed. "We're just happy." Same thing Ellie said. Later, as the house quieted and Ellie drifted to sleep in her new room, Jack stood on the porch with Camille watching the rain mist across the street lamps. "I was just a guy," he said, "trying to get home with a donut and a sleepy kid." And then the world shifted. Camille wrapped her arms around his waist. "You weren't just anything. You were exactly who I needed." Jack looked at her. "You ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't been there that day?" She shook her head. "No, because I don't believe in accidents anymore." Jack pulled her close. "Me neither." In the quiet that followed, they stood in the doorway of a life neither of them had planned, but both had chosen. Not because it was easy, but because it was right. And far across the city, somewhere in another home, another single parent sat alone, maybe wondering if kindness mattered. If anyone noticed, they would. Because somewhere, a girl named Ellie had already signed up to tell them every breath counts, especially the ones we take for others. And the man who once thought his life was too small now knew the truth. Some hearts don't need fixing. They just need a place to keep beating. 6 months later, the Seattle air was warm with the promise of spring. Children laughed in the distance, chasing bubbles and paper kites near the edge of Jefferson Park. The cherry trees were beginning to bloom, quiet pink explosions lining the sidewalks outside the newly repurposed community center that now bore a brass plaque above the door. Every Breath Counts initiative, in honor of those who stayed when it mattered most. Inside, the gymnasium pulsed with life. There were CPR mannequins lined up in rows, first aid kits stacked neatly along the wall, and a circle of volunteers in matching Navy shirts preparing for the afternoon's big event, the launch of their first citywide youth responder program. At the center of it all stood Jack Monroe, clipboard in hand, sleeves rolled up, smiling like a man who had finally caught up with the life that once outran him. He moved with ease now, not because life was simple, but because it was shared. Because every day he woke up to a new kind of peace, the kind built not from perfection, but from purpose. Dad Ellie's voice rang out from across the room, high and joyful. She ran toward him in her own mini-sized Every Breath Counts t-shirt, proudly holding a ribbon-wrapped certificate. He knelt to meet her. "You finished the full responder level already?" "Yep," she beamed. "I passed everything, even the Heimlich test." Jack's eyes softened. "You're officially more qualified than I was when I saved Camille." "Don't worry," she whispered. "I'll back you up next time." He pulled her into a hug, heart full. In the hallway, Camille stood beside a small team of foundation partners finalizing notes for the press. But her eyes kept drifting back toward Jack and Ellie like they were a fire she never wanted to stray far from. She no longer wore the armor of image. Her elegance remained, but now it glowed with something quieter, something earned. Mira leaned in beside her. "This is the best thing we've ever built." Camille nodded, and the only thing that's ever felt real all the way through. Mira smiled. "You should tell them." "I plan to," Camille replied, already stepping toward the gym. That afternoon, as folding chairs filled with local families and city leaders, Camille took the stage under a modest string of lights. Jack stood off to the side with Ellie arms loosely crossed, waiting to see what she'd say. 6 months ago, Camille began. "I was lying on a sidewalk in Seattle. I had no pulse. I had no breath. I had no direction. The room grew still. And then someone who wasn't paid to care, who didn't know my name, gave me all three back. She glanced at Jack. He blinked slowly, swallowing emotion. His name is Jack Monroe. He's a father, a mechanic, a man who showed me that love isn't always loud, it's steady, and sometimes it shows up in the form of calloused hands and quiet courage. A tear slipped down someone's cheek in the second row. Camille continued, voice strong. This program, Every Breath Counts, isn't about celebrity or philanthropy. It's about you. It's about neighbors saving neighbors, fathers teaching daughters, communities learning that their power comes from their people. She looked down, then up again with a soft smile, because sometimes one act of kindness doesn't just save a life, it creates one. The applause was instant, standing, roaring, heartfelt. Jack didn't move right away, but Ellie tugged his hand. Go. He stepped up beside Camille. She turned to him and without a word passed the mic into his hand. Jack cleared his throat. I never thought I'd stand in a room like this. Honestly, 6 months ago, I was just trying to keep the lights on and get my kid to school on time. Laughter rippled gently through the crowd. But something happens when you realize your story matters, not just the survival parts, but the why you keep going. This center, these people, they gave me back the part of myself I'd forgotten I had. He looked toward Ellie. She reminded me. Every night when I sang the lullaby her mom used to hum, when she told me I was already enough. Jack paused, then turned toward Camille. And Camille, she didn't just come back to life on that sidewalk. She came into life. She chose not just to survive, but to build. He looked out at the audience. And now, it's our turn. The crowd rose again, this time, slower, deliberate. A standing ovation that wasn't about fanfare. It was about truth. That evening, after the guests had gone and the sun began to dip behind the city skyline, Jack and Camille stood on the center's rooftop garden where Ellie danced among potted herbs and wildflowers. The city glowed below. I still can't believe this is real, Jack murmured. Camille leaned into him. Believe it. You made it real. He looked at her, wonder still in his voice. Do you think we'll keep going, that we can make this last? She didn't hesitate. We already have. He turned, took her hands in his. Camille Durand, you were the breath I didn't know I needed. She smiled. Jack Monroe, you were the silence I didn't know needed breaking. And then beneath the sky where their stories first collided, they kissed, quiet, deep, whole. A promise made not of words, but of presence. A few feet away, Ellie twirled her laughter, floating up like music. And in that moment, life didn't need to be perfect. It just needed to be lived with love, with grace, and with the knowledge that even one breath, one act, one person can change everything. We'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from, and what part of this story touched you the most? Single dad picked up the wrong woman at the airport. But the CEO said, I've been looking for you. The rain came down in chaotic sheets, slashing the windshield like nature's own tantrum. Ethan Blake leaned forward in the driver's seat of the hotel's black SUV, squinting through the wipers as they struggled to keep up. JFK International was a maze of horns, headlights, and human exhaustion. Flights were delayed, rerouted, or outright canceled. Travelers shuffled like ghosts, their umbrellas flipping inside out in the wind. Ethan glanced at the dashboard clock, 5:42 p.m. His phone buzzed on the passenger seat. A message from hotel dispatch blinked on screen. Guest Catherine Walters has canceled. Do not proceed. He sighed. This was his last pickup for the day. Maybe he'd make it home early enough to read Liam a bedtime story. Not that the 7-year-old needed stories anymore, but Ethan liked reading them anyway. It was one of the few places where his voice felt safe, unjudged, like it still held value. He was about to pull away when the rear terminal doors hissed open. A woman stepped into the storm, dragging a small leather suitcase behind her. No umbrella, just a drenched wool coat clinging to her like a second skin. She paused on the curb, blinking rain from her lashes, scanning the crowd like she'd just realized she was on the wrong planet. Something about her stopped him. Maybe it was the way she clutched her coat shut, or the unguarded confusion in her expression. Maybe it was the fact that she looked like someone who never got rained on, someone used to first-class lounges and private cars, not stranded curbsides. He opened the window halfway. Miss Walters. The woman turned. For a beat too long, she said nothing. Her lips parted as if she were about to say no, but then something flickered across her face. Recognition. Hope. Sadness. "Yes," she said. "I suppose I am." Ethan hesitated, but the look in her eyes, like she hadn't spoken that word in years, made him unlock the doors. She slid into the back seat, dripping water onto the floor mats. Ethan offered her a towel he kept for Liam's soccer games. She accepted it with a faint smile, but said nothing else. No small talk, no instructions. Just silence, heavy and oddly intimate. As he drove, he kept glancing at her through the rear-view mirror. Her features were striking, refined, confident, but not overly made up. There was a calmness about her that felt rehearsed, like someone who had practiced serenity for years. Halfway through Queens, he cleared his throat. "Sorry about the wait. The airport's a mess today." She nodded without looking up. "It's all right. Some things are worth waiting for." The way she said it, it didn't sound like she was talking about traffic. Ethan's grip on the steering wheel tightened slightly. By the time they crossed the East River, the rain had eased into a whisper, tapping gently against the windows like a lullaby, trying to calm something inside them both. The Manhattan skyline loomed ahead, washed in gray. Ethan flicked his signal as they neared the hotel. "You sure you're staying at the Rosewood? I don't have a reservation under your name." "That's all right," she said. "I made some spontaneous changes." He parked beneath the awning, stepping out quickly to open her door. As she stepped onto the pavement, she paused, staring at him with a look that made his skin crawl in the most inexplicable way. "You really don't remember me, do you?" she asked softly. The words hit him like a flash of heat through the cold. He blinked. "Sorry." "Should I?" She tilted her head, her wet hair clinging to her cheek. "No, I suppose not." He watched her walk through the lobby doors, her heels clicking like punctuation marks at the end of some unfinished sentence. Back in the driver's seat, Ethan sat motionless for a long minute. Something about her bothered him, not in a bad way, but in the way an old song does when you can't remember the lyrics but can still hum the melody. He shook it off. His job was done. He had a kid to get home to laundry to fold and a sink full of cereal bowls waiting to remind him how ordinary his life really was. But as he pulled away from the curb, the clouds above began to break. A single shaft of sunlight pierced the storm landing directly on the spot where she had just stood. He didn't know it yet, but nothing about this day had been a mistake. The hotel lobby shimmered with quiet elegance. Crystal pendant lights, polished marble floors, and fresh-cut orchids whose perfume lingered like the memory of a kiss. Claire stepped inside, leaving the storm behind her, but she didn't shake off the chill. It was the kind that came from within, not from rain or wind, but from memories brushing against the edge of the present. The front desk attendant greeted her warmly, fingers poised above the keyboard. "Good evening. May I have your name for the reservation?" Claire hesitated. 1,000 names passed through her mind, names she'd signed on mergers contracts and letters of intent, names the press had plastered across headlines like badges of war, but none of them felt like hers tonight. Finally, she said, "Claire Donovan." The attendant typed. A beat passed, then another. He frowned. "I'm sorry, Miss Donovan. I don't see a reservation under your name. Perhaps it's under someone else's." She smiled faintly. "It's all right. I didn't book ahead." He blinked. "Oh. Well, we do have availability. Would you like a deluxe or an executive suite? I'll take whatever's furthest from the elevators," she said. "Quiet if possible." He nodded and began the process. Claire's eyes drifted across the lobby. Through the glass doors, she could still see Ethan's SUV pulling away from the curb. Something tightened in her chest, some inexplicable blend of relief, pain, and hope. She had found him. But he didn't remember her. Up in her room, Claire dropped her coat over a velvet chair and peeled off her damp sweater. The suite was tasteful modern lines, soft lighting, quiet luxury, but to her it felt hollow. Most places did these days. She stood by the window and watched the rain. The city shimmered below its lights, glinting through the water-streaked glass like stars trying to fight their way through a storm. It had taken her nearly 15 years. 15 years since that night in the hospital. 15 years of therapy, of achievements, of building an empire out of the ashes of her grief. And still she had never stopped looking. She hadn't even known his name. No badge, no uniform, just a man in a worn hoodie sitting beside her as she broke down silently, offering her his coat and then his hand. He didn't speak. He just stayed. While nurses bustled past and doctors whispered final words to other families, he had anchored her to the earth. That night, he had saved her. And now she'd looked into his eyes again. The same eyes. Worn, now wearier, lined with responsibility. A father's eyes. But kind. Still impossibly kind. He didn't remember. Of course he didn't. The next morning, Ethan arrived early for work, Liam in tow. The boy was half asleep, clinging to his backpack like it was a life raft. "I hate Thursdays," Liam muttered as they entered through the service entrance. Ethan tousled his son's hair. "Thursdays build character. So do cold bagels, missed school buses, and your old man's bad singing." Liam grunted, but a smile crept in anyway. Ethan dropped him off with the front desk clerk who watched Liam on early shifts when no babysitter was available. As he passed the lobby, his eyes flicked automatically toward the guest list tablet. Claire Donovan, room 1407. Still checked in. He told himself not to care. Clients came and went. So did names. But he couldn't stop remembering the way she'd said that line. "You don't remember me, do you?" Why did it haunt him? Later that afternoon, Claire entered the lobby wearing a fresh change of clothes, slim charcoal slacks, and a navy blouse, and her posture was different. Composed. Quietly powerful. The kind of presence that turned heads without trying. Ethan was speaking to a French couple whose luggage had gone missing in transit. He greeted them fluently in their native tongue, helping them calm down, switching effortlessly between English and French as he solved the issue. Claire paused a few feet away, watching him. The same man who once gave her his only warmth, now helping strangers with that same silent grace. He hadn't changed. Life had bent him, maybe even broken him, but he hadn't let it make him cold. When he turned and saw her, their eyes locked. Just a moment. No smile, no wave. Just the weight of something unspoken passing between them. That evening, Claire dined alone in the rooftop restaurant. She brought a notebook, but didn't open it. Instead, she watched the city breathe beneath her, its pulse constant, eternal. She had flown into New York under the guise of a business visit. But she hadn't told her team, hadn't scheduled a single meeting. She hadn't even packed a laptop. That wasn't like her, but neither was this. What was this obsession? No, it wasn't that. She wasn't chasing a fantasy. She was chasing the man who once sat beside her in silence and reminded her that even in the worst moment of her life, she wasn't invisible. She took a deep breath. Maybe she couldn't make him remember. But maybe that didn't matter. Maybe she just needed to give back, not out of obligation, but because sometimes life hands you a miracle in secret, and if you're lucky enough to hold on to it, you honor it the only way you can. By giving someone else the chance to be seen. She pulled out a business card and wrote something on the back in small, deliberate handwriting. Then she folded it and slid it into an envelope. Tomorrow she would give it to him. Not to demand recognition, not to claim anything, but to say, "I remember." And it mattered. The sun filtered gently through the windows of the Rosewoods Cafe, painting golden stripes across the hardwood floors and scattering warmth on a chilly New York morning. Claire sat at a corner table near the window, her coffee untouched, her gaze fixed on a small boy seated 2 tables away. A mop of dark blonde curls, a paper airplane in one hand, a slice of banana bread in the other. He was humming to himself something off-key and sweet. She couldn't look away. Ethan appeared moments later with 2 mugs of cocoa and a napkin he tucked under the boy's chin with practiced tenderness. The kind of touch that had long become second nature. "Careful, Liam. No more cocoa avalanches today." The boy giggled. That was one time Claire smiled without realizing it. When Ethan noticed her, he offered a polite nod, professional restrained. But there was hesitation in it. The way someone acknowledges a dream they're not sure they really had. Claire took that as permission. "May I?" she asked, approaching their table. Liam looked up first. His eyes were curious, fearless. "You're the lady from the elevator," he said, grinning. "I am," Claire replied, kneeling slightly to his eye level. "And I heard someone humming a tune I used to hum when I was your age. It's called Mission Mars." "I made it up," Liam said proudly. Ethan gave Claire an apologetic look. "He's a composer, among other things." Claire chuckled. "That's impressive. May I sit for a minute?" Ethan paused, unsure. But Liam, clearly having made the executive decision for the group, pulled out the chair beside him. "You can sit here," he said. Claire took the seat, easing into the strange comfort of their company. For a few minutes conversation flowed like a quiet stream, childish observations from Liam, cautious replies from Ethan, and a gentle rhythm between the 3 of them that felt oddly right. "What do you do?" Liam asked between bites. Claire smiled. "I'm a problem solver." "Like my dad," he said instantly. "He fixes everything. The radiator, the dishwasher, a broken nose one time." Ethan groaned. "That was an accident at soccer, not a bar fight." Claire laughed. "I believe you." "And you," Liam pressed. "What kind of problems?" She hesitated, choosing her words. "I help people who are stuck, people who've forgotten how big the world can be. I remind them." Liam gave a small, thoughtful nod. "That's cool." Ethan's eyes softened. "That's more poetic than most CEOs I know." Claire tilted her head. "How do you know I'm a CEO? You're staying in a penthouse, you wear clothes like someone who doesn't check price tags, and your phone hasn't stopped buzzing since you sat down, but you haven't looked at it once. That's power. Real power doesn't need to announce itself." Claire blinked, stunned into silence for half a second. Then, "You're observant." "I drive people for a living," Ethan replied. "I pay attention. People talk more when they think you're not listening." Something about that statement stayed with her. She leaned forward slightly. "And do you ever feel stuck?" Ethan hesitated. "Sometimes." Liam looked between them. "We were stuck in an elevator once. That was the worst." Claire smiled. "Was it scary?" "No," Liam said seriously, "because Dad held my hand and told me we'd be fine. And he was right." She swallowed hard. The image pierced something soft in her the same way that long-ago night in the hospital had when she thought the world had ended, but someone beside her refused to let her fall apart. Later that day, Ethan was rearranging guest luggage in the back storage bay when the hotel concierge passed him an envelope. "This was left for you by the guest in 1407, she said. He opened it. Inside a business card. "Claire Donovan, CEO, Donovan Nexus." And beneath the printed words, handwritten in fine blue ink, "Sometimes silence says more than words. You didn't speak that night, but you stayed." Ethan stood frozen, the card trembling slightly in his hand. That night. A flurry of dim recollections flickered, flashing white hallway lights, the sound of someone weeping on the bench outside the NICU. His own grief, a raging sea. He'd sat next to her. Not to fix her. Just to be there. Because she looked as lost as he felt. He hadn't known her name. He never expected to see her again. Back in her suite, Claire lay awake with the city blinking beneath her. She didn't expect him to rush in with gratitude or sweeping declarations. That wasn't what she was here for. She just wanted him to know it mattered. that the man who gave without asking, who sat in silent solidarity while her world fell apart, he had saved her. And now, if fate allowed, she wanted the chance to return the favor, not out of obligation, but out of the quiet, profound truth that sometimes the people who once held your broken pieces eventually deserve someone to hold theirs. Tomorrow she would see him again, not as the girl from the past, but as the woman who had finally found the man who once saw her before she knew how to see herself. The lobby was quiet the next morning, sunlight filtering through the high windows like warm honey. The hustle hadn't yet begun, no guests in line, no ringing phones, just the low hum of city life beginning to stir. Ethan stood near the front desk organizing a clipboard, trying and failing not to glance toward the elevator. She hadn't come down yet. He told himself he wasn't waiting, that the business card she left yesterday was just an echo of a forgotten moment. But truth had a way of sitting in your chest like weight, heavy, unrelenting. The memory was surfacing now whether he wanted it to or not. That hospital hallway, the blue-tinged lighting, the antiseptic chill, his hands trembling after hours of pacing, of praying. His wife Samantha was in labor. Complications. Premature. He'd gone to the hallway to breathe, to not fall apart. And there she was. A young woman folded in on herself at the end of a bench face buried in her hands, shoulders shuddering with the kind of grief no one can fake. Something in him had known instantly that her world had just shattered. He hadn't known what to say. So he didn't say anything. He sat beside her, offered his coat, offered silence. And when her sobs threatened to tear her apart, he gently reached out and held her hand. No names, no words, just warmth. Ethan didn't hear the elevator ding behind him until Liam came running from the side hallway. Miss Claire, the boy, shouted. Ethan turned. She stood there in a simple ivory sweater and dark jeans, her hair pulled back casually, but her presence still lit up the room. She knelt smiling and opened her arms. "You remember me then," she teased. "I remember you," Liam said proudly, hugging her. "Dad says I forget stuff, but I remember the important things." Claire looked up just briefly and met Ethan's eyes. He was already watching. They met again at lunch. Not by plan, but by something quieter, something organic. Claire had taken her laptop to the Courtyard Cafe, a quiet space tucked behind the hotel with potted trees and wrought iron tables. She hadn't worked at all. Her screen remained dark while her mind wandered. She didn't notice Ethan until he placed a glass of water on her table. She looked up. "Is this room service?" "No," he said. "Just thought you might need one." Her smile was slow, genuine. "Thank you." He sat across from her, an unspoken invitation she didn't question. For a moment, neither spoke. The rustling leaves and distant horns of New York filled the space between them. Then Ethan cleared his throat. "I remember you." Claire looked up, startled, not because she doubted he would, but because hearing it aloud felt like a key turning in a long-locked door. It was the maternity floor, he continued. "I was waiting outside the NICU. My wife, Samantha, was inside. We'd lost a baby before. This one was early, too. I went out to breathe and saw you on that bench." Claire's eyes shimmered. My mother had just died. Stage 4. It happened so fast. I didn't even have time to process it. "You looked so small," Ethan said quietly. "I didn't know what to do." "You did exactly what I needed," she said. "You stayed. No one else did." He looked down at his hands. "I didn't even remember your face. Until yesterday." "You weren't meant to," Claire replied, "but I remembered everything." A breeze lifted the edges of her napkin, and for a second neither of them moved, just let the silence wrap around them like the night they once shared, wordless but not empty. "I searched for you," she added. "Years later. Not obsessively, just hoping one day I'd run into the man who reminded me I wasn't invisible." Ethan shook his head gently. "I wasn't trying to do anything heroic." "I know," she whispered. "That's why it was." Later that day, Claire found herself walking through the hotel's quiet halls, a strange energy in her chest like something was blooming after years of lying dormant. She hadn't meant to stay this long, hadn't planned on getting involved. But Ethan was more than a moment from her past. He was proof that kindness wasn't a myth, that strength could come quietly. In the hallway, she passed Liam again. He was kneeling on the floor, coloring. "Hey, kiddo," she said, crouching beside him. "What are you drawing?" He held it up proudly. A stick figure family, 3 people holding hands, a house, a dog, a sun with too many rays. "That's me and Dad," he said. "And that's you." Claire blinked. "You drew me." "You're happy in it," he said. "'Cause we let you stay." She bit her lip. "I haven't asked if I'm allowed to stay." Liam tilted his head. "Do you want to?" Her answer caught in her throat. "I'm starting to." That night, back in his modest apartment, Ethan sat in the quiet after Liam had gone to bed. He held the business card she'd given him in one hand, his thumb tracing the handwritten message. "You didn't speak that night, but you stayed." He stared at the sentence for a long time, then stood, walked to the shelf in the hallway, pulled out an old photo box, and for the first time in 7 years, he opened it. Inside were faded ultrasound photos, hospital bracelets, a yellowed page from a parenting magazine with a circled article about sleep schedules, and at the bottom, a frayed coat. His old hoodie, the one he'd given her. He'd forgotten he still had it. Ethan held it in his hands and exhaled slowly. There were moments in life that didn't ask for recognition. They asked to be remembered. And for the first time, he wasn't afraid of what would come next. He was curious, hopeful. Maybe it wasn't too late to let someone stay. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the air still carried that earthy scent of streets washed clean, like the world was offering a second chance. Ethan stood at the breakfast bar in his kitchen flipping pancakes for Liam, trying not to overthink what today might bring. But his hands betrayed him. He burned the first one and undercooked the second. Liam sat at the table legs, swinging back and forth, eyes fixed on his sketch pad. "Miss Claire likes strawberries," he said suddenly, as if it were part of some ongoing conversation. Ethan looked over his shoulder. "Does she?" "She picked them off her muffin and saved them for last. That means they're her favorite. That's what my teacher says." Ethan smiled in spite of himself. "You're observant." Liam grinned. "I get it from you." He flipped the next pancake more carefully, but his chest felt tight. Yesterday had shifted something inside him and he wasn't sure what to do with it. Claire stood by the lobby fountain, tapping something into her phone before tucking it away. She wore a soft camel coat, hair loose today, her expression focused but not closed. She seemed less like a CEO and more like someone deciding to be present. When Ethan approached her with Liam trailing behind, Claire looked up, and her smile was immediate warm. "You two are becoming a habit," she said. Liam beamed. "We brought you something." He held out a small to-go box wrapped with a red napkin. Inside, 2 pancakes shaped like stars topped with fresh-cut strawberries. Claire laughed genuinely. "Are these?" "My dad made them," Liam said proudly. "I only helped with the taste testing." Claire glanced at Ethan, who shrugged, figured it was safer than burnt toast. They shared a quiet laugh, and for a moment it felt normal, effortless. That afternoon, Claire took Liam for a walk through the Central Park Conservatory garden. The hotel staff had offered a babysitter, but Liam had asked for Claire. He didn't want to see the new Spider-Man exhibit. He wanted to hang out with the lady who listens. Claire had blinked when Ethan told her, then simply said, "I'd be honored." Ethan had almost said no. Almost. He didn't know why he'd agreed, maybe because Liam seemed happier lately, or maybe because something in Claire's presence felt steady, unthreatening, familiar in a way Ethan hadn't known he was craving. But as he watched them leave, Claire holding Liam's hand, letting him set the pace, he felt an ache he didn't expect. Not jealousy, fear. Fear that he was letting something in. Again. Alone in the apartment that afternoon, Ethan found himself standing in Liam's room. It was a modest space bunk bed, posters of planets and dinosaurs, a bookshelf with more bedtime stories than any child would ever need. He touched a framed photo on the shelf. Samantha smiling in the hospital bed, Liam wrapped like a burrito in her arms. She had looked so strong that day, even after 20 hours of labor. And then, 12 days later, she was gone. A blood clot. A nurse said the word embolism like it wasn't supposed to shatter a life. Ethan had folded in on himself after that, gone into survival mode. The man who had once dreamed of building homes now worked fixing pipes and patching drywall. He didn't chase dreams, he clung to stability because hope was what made people bleed. He hadn't let anyone in. Not really. But Claire. Claire was different. She didn't push. She noticed. And somehow that was harder to resist than anything loud or dramatic. Meanwhile, in the garden, Liam was giving Claire a guided tour as if he were the appointed ambassador of Central Park. He pointed out every duck, every oddly shaped tree branch, every flower whose name he had half remembered. Claire listened, nodded, asked questions not out of politeness but with true interest. "Are you going to stay forever?" Liam asked suddenly as they reached a bench. Claire paused. "Forever is a long time." Liam squinted. "I don't like when grown-ups say that. They always mean no." She studied his face. "Would it be so bad if I stayed?" Liam shrugged. "Not to me. But Dad doesn't let people stay." "Why do you think that is?" He thought about it, picking at a blade of grass. "Maybe he's afraid they'll leave anyway." Claire's throat tightened. "Are you going to leave?" he asked, not accusing, just curious. "I don't want to," she said honestly. Liam gave her a slow, satisfied nod. "Okay, then I'll keep your seat saved." He patted the bench beside him. That night, Ethan opened the door to find Claire standing outside his apartment. She wore no makeup, no armor, just a soft expression and a paper bag in hand. "I brought soup," she said. He blinked. "Soup. You looked like someone who hasn't had dinner that wasn't beige in a long time." He chuckled, despite himself, and stepped aside. Inside, Claire set the bag on the table and unpacked 2 containers of homemade minestrone she'd had the hotel chef whip up as a favor. "You didn't have to," I know she interrupted. "I wanted to." They ate quietly. Liam told her about his science project and made her laugh with impressions of his teacher. But later, after Liam had gone to bed, the silence between Ethan and Claire changed. Deeper, more exposed. Claire sipped her tea. "Why did you let me stay?" He didn't answer right away. "Then, because I didn't realize how lonely I was, until I wasn't." Claire looked at him soft-eyed. "You don't have to fix everything, Ethan." He exhaled. "I've built my whole life around fixing things." She reached across the table, gently placing her hand on his. "Maybe it's time someone held you together for a while." He didn't speak, but he didn't pull away either. Outside, the city buzzed with the quiet pulse of a million lives moving on with or without you. Inside, for the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel like he was bracing for something to break. He just felt still. And maybe ready. The city was alive with the soft hum of early evening traffic, slowing windows, glowing autumn leaves, stirring in sidewalk gusts. Inside, room 1407, Claire sat at the small desk by the window. Her fingers paused above her keyboard. The cursor blinked on the empty email draft. She had intended to send a check-in note to her board of directors, just something simple to justify her extended stay. But her hands wouldn't move. What would she even say? "I came for a site visit and found the man who once held my hand in a hospital hallway 15 years ago. And now I don't know how to leave." Instead, she closed the laptop gently and stood. The reflection in the window looked back at her, not the CEO in polished heels and precision plans, but the woman who longed for something she'd never written into any 5-year strategy. A woman who for the first time in a long time didn't feel so tired of being strong. Downstairs in the hotel staff room, Ethan was watching Liam try to balance a muffin on his forehead while reciting the names of all the planets in reverse order. Neptune, Uranus, Saturn. Wait, no, I skipped Jupiter. The muffin toppled to the floor with a dramatic thud. Ethan laughed. I'm impressed by the ambition, kid. Liam wiped his forehead and shrugged. Miss Claire bet me I couldn't do it. Ethan raised an eyebrow. She bet you muffins, mini muffins, Liam corrected. She's a smart negotiator. Ethan smiled to himself, shaking his head. That woman had a way of slipping into their lives like she belonged there. And strangely, it didn't feel like an intrusion. It felt like oxygen. Later that day, Claire joined Ethan and Liam in the hotel's rooftop garden, a quiet, underused terrace with a view of the city that shimmered like a secret only a few were allowed to see. Liam ran ahead, chasing invisible dragons, while Ethan and Claire walked side by side along the stone path between potted lavender and tiny olive trees. Claire broke the silence first. I've decided to stay a few more days. Ethan nodded slowly. Everything all right with your schedule? I cleared it, she said, hands tucked into the pockets of her coat. Apparently the company won't collapse without me for another 48 hours. He gave a short laugh. Sounds like good leadership. She glanced at him. Sounds like avoidance. He looked over at her more serious now, avoiding what her gaze was steady, leaving. Ethan stopped walking. Claire, I'm not asking you for anything, she said quickly, her voice soft but steady. I just want to be where I feel seen, and for some reason here with you and Liam, I do. He didn't answer right away. He looked out over the city. So many lights, so many lives, and somehow hers had crossed back into his. I've spent years trying to make life small enough to control, he said at last. Schedules, routines, repairs. If something breaks, I know how to fix it. But you... Claire's brows lifted gently. Me. You're not something I know how to fix, he admitted. And that scares me. She stepped closer. I'm not asking you to fix me either. A long silence passed between them. Not heavy, just honest. Then Ethan looked down at her. Liam told me you're the lady who listens. Claire laughed softly. He said that, yeah. He also said he wants to keep your seat saved, just in case you stay. Claire's throat tightened. And you? He hesitated. Then quietly, I haven't thought about what I want in a long time. That night, Claire found herself sitting in the hotel cafe with Liam while Ethan wrapped up a plumbing emergency in one of the guest suites. Liam was busy drawing on a napkin with a borrowed pen tongue poking out of the corner of his mouth in concentration. What are you working on? She asked. A map, he said. To the best day ever. Claire leaned in. What's on it? Breakfast with Dad. Garden dragons. You. And pancakes. She smiled. That does sound like a pretty good day. He paused, then looked up at her with an expression far wiser than his age should have allowed. My dad's really brave, you know, he said. But he gets scared too. He just doesn't say it out loud. Claire swallowed. What do you think he's afraid of? Liam shrugged. I don't know. But sometimes I think it's the same stuff I'm afraid of, like someone saying goodbye without warning. Claire blinked. The weight of that landed deep. I'm not planning to say goodbye, she whispered. Good, Liam said, returning to his napkin, 'cause I haven't drawn the way out yet. Later that evening, Ethan knocked on Claire's door. She opened it slowly, a little surprised. He looked conflicted. I don't usually do this, he began. Claire waited, but I didn't want the day to end without saying something. She tilted her head. What is it? He shifted his weight. I'm not good at letting people in. I don't know how to do that and still keep Liam safe. Or myself. Claire's voice was calm. That's okay. I just thought you should know. He said, glancing at the floor, that I haven't let anyone get this close in years. She stepped forward. And yet, here I am. He looked up, met her eyes. "Yeah," he said. "Here you are." She didn't touch him, didn't kiss him, just stood there quietly present. And somehow, in that stillness, something opened. Not all the way, but just enough. Enough to let the possibility in. Enough to make staying feel less like a risk, and more like the beginning of something finally worth hoping for. The day began with light spilling into the city like forgiveness. Central Park glistened with dew, and the streets, still damp from the night's drizzle, shimmered under early sunlight. Claire stood in front of her mirror, hands paused over her earrings. Her reflection looked calm. But inside, something trembled. Today was Liam's birthday. She hadn't planned to be here for it. She hadn't planned to still be in this hotel. But somehow, over the past week, the days had softened around Ethan and Liam like petals folding inward. And she wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. She had an idea. A simple one, but from the heart. A surprise. At the hotel, Ethan had just finished fixing a jammed door on the 11th floor when he noticed the time. 1:07 p.m. Liam should have been back from school by now. He headed to the front desk expecting to see his son waiting with a snack or doodling in the corner like always. But Liam wasn't there. "Hey, have you seen my son Ethan?" asked the concierge. The woman looked up. "Liam. Oh, I thought Claire had picked him up today. She said it was prearranged." Ethan's heart dropped. "She what?" "She said you two planned something for his birthday." He didn't hear the rest. The world around him blurred as adrenaline surged through his chest. He pulled out his phone and called Claire. No answer. Again. Voicemail. By the third ring, panic tightened its grip. He bolted for the staff elevator. Claire and Liam were walking through the Met Museum's Temple of Dender exhibit hand in hand. Claire had arranged for a small private guide to show Liam around the Egyptian artifacts, and the boy was bouncing with excitement. "This is awesome," Liam said, eyes wide. "Dad's gonna freak when he hears I saw a real mummy." Claire grinned, but worry crept at the edge of her thoughts. She had texted Ethan earlier, told him about the plan. Maybe she should have double-checked. Maybe her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. 6 missed calls, 3 voicemails, all from Ethan. Before she could press play, the phone rang again. She answered. Ethan. "Where is he?" His voice was razor-sharp. Raw. "Liam. He's with me. Well, you took him. Without telling me. Are you out of your mind?" Claire stopped walking. Liam paused beside her, sensing something shift. "I left you a message. I thought you thought what Claire, that it's okay to take someone's kid without clear permission, that it's your place to make that call." Her voice lowered. "I just wanted to make his birthday special. I didn't mean to. Don't bring him back to the hotel. Meet me at the cafe on 72nd and Columbus. Now." Then the line went dead. The cafe was almost empty when Claire arrived with Liam. Ethan was already there, pacing near the window, jaw, tight arms folded. Claire gently nudged Liam toward the counter. "Go pick out something. I'll be there in a minute." Liam nodded slowly and stepped away. Claire turned to Ethan. "Ethan, I swear I thought I was doing something kind. I wasn't trying to overstep." "You did overstep," he snapped. "He's my son. You don't get to decide what's good for him without asking me." "I tried. I left messages. I thought you saw." "You thought. That's the problem." His voice cracked then, just slightly. Claire's expression softened. "I'm sorry." He looked at her eyes filled with something deeper than anger. Hurt. Fear. "You don't get it," he said. "You show up and suddenly Liam's drawing pictures with you in them. He asks if you'll be at Thanksgiving. You bake muffins and make birthday plans and laugh like you belong, but you don't." "Not really." Claire's breath hitched. "You think I don't understand loss?" she asked, voice trembling. "You think I don't know what it means to let someone matter and then lose them without warning?" Ethan looked away, fists clenched. "I'm not going to leave him," she whispered. "Or you." "You will," he said more quietly now. "Eventually. People like you. You always leave. And Liam, he doesn't know how to recover from that. And I'm not sure I do either. Silence sat between them, thick as winter fog. Claire stepped forward. "Ethan," she said gently, "I don't want to fix anything. I just want to be here. But you're holding your whole life like it's made of glass waiting for the next shatter. I'm not the one breaking it." He closed his eyes. Tears pressed behind them but didn't fall. Maybe he murmured, "I just don't know how to let someone stay." Claire reached into her bag and handed him a small envelope. Inside was a folded paper, Liam's drawing from the other night, the one with the sun, the house, and 3 people holding hands. "I didn't ask for this," she said, "but I'd be lying if I said I didn't want it." She glanced toward the counter where Liam was still picking between 2 pastries, totally unaware of the emotional wreckage a few feet away. "I'll go if you want me to," Claire said. "I'll pack up tonight. But I needed you to know I wasn't playing a part. I wasn't trying to win anything." She paused. "I just wanted to belong somewhere again." Then she turned and walked to Liam. They left the cafe quietly. And Ethan, who had spent years mastering the art of holding everything together, felt something in him collapse. Not like a building, but like a dam. And the water behind it had a name. Claire. The hotel suite was unnaturally quiet that evening. Claire stood in the center of room 1407, her suitcase open on the bed, half filled, half abandoned. A folded blue sweater rested on top one she'd worn the day Liam spilled cocoa on her sleeve and laughed so hard he almost cried. She traced its sleeve with her fingers, then closed her eyes. How quickly something could start to feel like home. She moved slowly, methodically, placing books in a neat stack, zipping up toiletries, folding the photo Liam had drawn and tucked into her purse pocket. He had called it Our Team. Stick figures in front of a house with their names in blocky letters, Liam, Dad, Claire. The sun smiled in the corner. Her chest tightened. She'd promised herself she would never get attached without permission. And yet she had. Quietly, irrevocably, completely. She took a seat at the writing desk by the window and pulled a hotel notepad toward her. The pen hovered above the page. Then it moved. Ethan. I never expected to find you. I didn't come here searching for anything except closure. For years, I've remembered that night in the hospital, the worst night of my life, and how somehow the presence of a stranger kept me from falling apart. You didn't ask my name. You didn't offer cliches or try to fix what was broken. You just stayed, and that changed everything. I wanted to tell you thank you. I thought that's all it would be. But then I met Liam. And I saw your life, your quiet strength, the way you protect what you love with every ounce of yourself. And I realized that the man who once saved a stranger with silence had spent years saving his own son with the same gentle, invisible grace. And I fell for both of you. Not in some sweeping romantic way, not like the stories we see in movies, but in the real, deep, terrifying way people do when they realize they've found something too good to ask for. I didn't mean to take Liam without asking. I truly thought you'd seen the message. But more than that, I made the mistake of believing I belonged in your world without asking you first. I'm sorry for that. But I'm not sorry for caring. I'm not sorry for hoping. You said you don't know how to let someone stay. So I'll go. But I'm leaving you this not to change your mind, not to guilt you into chasing after me, but so you know what you gave me. You made me feel visible. You made me feel safe again. And if there's even a part of you that wants to find me not out of obligation, but because your heart is ready, then you'll know where to look. Until then, I'll keep the door open. Claire. She folded the note and tucked it beneath the ceramic mug on the kitchen counter. No signature, no drama, just truth. And then she pulled the zipper on her suitcase shut. As she turned off the lights and softly closed the door behind her, something in her chest ached, not like a bruise but like something newly unwrapped. A love not rejected, just not ready yet. Ethan didn't find the note until well past midnight. The hotel had quieted. Liam was already asleep, one arm draped over the side of the bed, clutching a half-crumpled drawing. Ethan had returned to room 1407, half expecting, half hoping to find her still there. But the room was empty. The air still held the faint trace of her perfume, warm, clean, like vanilla and quiet courage. He stood in the middle of the suite, motionless. Then he saw it, the mug on the counter, the corner of the note peeking out beneath it. He didn't rush. He walked to it as if it might disappear if he moved too fast. When he read the letter, his knees nearly buckled. He leaned against the counter, gripping the paper like it might anchor him. Every word hit something raw. Not because it begged, but because it didn't. Because she'd walked away with grace, not accusation. She'd loved with openness and accepted the silence that came back. And she'd left him the one thing he hadn't known he was missing. A choice. He sat on the edge of Liam's bed for a long time, watching his son breathe. Liam stirred one eye, fluttering open. Dad Ethan whispered, "Yeah, buddy, I'm here. Miss Claire, go home." Ethan hesitated. "Yeah, she did." Liam's voice was quiet. "Did you make her leave?" Ethan stared at the shadowed ceiling. "No," he said eventually. "I think I made her feel like she had to." Liam blinked up at him. "Why?" Ethan swallowed. "Because I was afraid. Of what a pause. Of needing someone I couldn't keep." Liam shifted under the covers. "If you're scared, I'll hold your hand." Ethan closed his eyes. It was the same phrase he had once said to a frightened stranger on a hospital bench. The same one Claire had never forgotten. The same one Liam now offered back to him. He opened his eyes and looked at his son. "I think I need that," he said. Liam smiled sleepily and reached out his small fingers, wrapping around Ethan's. And in that fragile, perfect moment, something inside Ethan cracked open, not in pain this time, but in release. He didn't know what he would do yet. But he knew one thing. He wasn't going to let the best thing he'd found slip away in silence. Not again. Not this time. Morning broke slowly. It wasn't the kind of sunrise that demanded attention. It was soft, unassuming, the kind that crept through the blinds without asking and warmed the space between father and son like a quiet promise. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, Claire's letter spread before him. He'd read it again just before making Liam's breakfast. Then again while the toast cooled, and now again after Liam had gone to brush his teeth. There were no flourishes in her words. No grand confessions. Just grace wrapped in stillness. He didn't know people could love like that without needing to be chosen back, without demanding proof. He'd been so focused on protecting Liam from abandonment that he hadn't realized he'd built a wall high enough to keep love from ever getting in. And now he had no idea how to lower it without breaking everything he'd spent years holding upright. But Liam's words from the night before still echoed in his head like a thread of light. "If you're scared, I'll hold your hand." He turned the phrase over again and again. Because that was what Claire had done, wasn't it? She had held his hand in spirit in silence, and then, finally, in truth. And now it was his turn. After walking Liam to school, Ethan didn't go back to work right away. He called out of his shift and instead walked the long way through the city, retracing memories he hadn't meant to hold on to. The hospital. The bench where Claire had sat 15 years ago. He found it still there, paint-chipped but whole. He sat. Back then he'd sat here because he had no words. Today he sat here because there were too many. And for the first time he let them rise. The helplessness of watching his wife die. The terror of holding a newborn with no idea how to raise him. The years of pushing through, fixing, controlling, surviving, but never really living. And then Claire had appeared. Not to save him, but to see him. Not to demand anything, but to remind him that he too was allowed to want something more. He sat on that bench until his heart steadied. And then he stood. And he ran. Claire was seated near a window in the Delta Sky Club at JFK, hands wrapped around a cup of mint tea, watching the tarmac blink and bustle in the distance. Her flight to London boarded in 40 minutes. The noise around her, blurred luggage wheels, murmured conversations, the clink of silverware. None of it reached her. She hadn't cried, not when she'd left the hotel, Not when the cab turned the corner, not when the gate agent printed her boarding pass. She told herself she was proud of how she'd left things dignified with love intact, but sitting here now with no one beside her, she felt hollow, the kind of hollow you only feel when you've tasted something real, and lost it. She looked down at her phone. No messages, no missed calls, no miracle last-minute arrivals. She'd told herself she didn't expect one, but still she hoped. Back in Manhattan, Ethan burst through the school's front office at 10:42 a.m., drawing looks from the receptionist and a few teachers. "I need to see Liam," he said, slightly out of breath. The woman blinked. "Is something wrong?" "No," he said. "Something's right. I need to tell him something." Within minutes, Liam appeared, lunchbox swinging at his side. "Dad," he asked, confused. "Did I forget something?" Ethan knelt in front of him, heart-pounding. "No, buddy. I forgot something." Liam tilted his head. "I forgot to say thank you," Ethan said, his voice catching. "Last night you said something to me, about holding my hand." "I meant it," Liam whispered, suddenly shy. "I know," Ethan said, smiling. "And because of you, I think I'm ready. Ready for what." Ethan stood, his hand resting lightly on his son's shoulder. "To find her." Liam's eyes lit up. "Miss Claire." Ethan nodded. "Yeah." "Miss Claire." Liam didn't hesitate. "Let's go." The cab hit traffic 3 blocks from the airport. Ethan glanced at the time, 10:58. Claire's flight boarded at 11:15. Liam kept bouncing beside him, peeking out the window like he could somehow will the cars to part. "She always waits at the window," he said suddenly, "when she's nervous." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "She told me," Liam said proudly. "She doesn't like being early to gates, but she likes to see the plane." Ethan laughed. "You really do listen." "I get it from you," Liam said, and it nearly undid Ethan. They sprinted through Terminal 4, dodging rolling luggage and startled travelers. At the top of the escalator near Gate 22, Ethan spotted her. Claire, hair tucked behind one ear, a book open on her lap, unread, staring out at the runway. His heart hammered. "Claire." She turned, saw them. For a second her face was unreadable, and then she stood. Ethan didn't slow as he approached. His voice was raw, breathless. "You said if I wanted to find you?" Her eyes shone. "I meant it." He stepped closer. "I was scared." "I know," she said gently. "So was I." He reached into his coat pocket and held up the folded drawing Liam had made, the one with all 3 of them, hand in hand under a crooked sun. "I've spent years afraid of letting someone stay," he said. "But you already did. And now, I want to stay with you." Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't want to fix anything," he added. "I just want to build something. Together." Claire didn't speak. She just stepped forward, took his hand, and placed it over her heart. Liam stood beside them, wide-eyed and beaming. A quiet family. Imperfect, unexpected, but whole. And somewhere a plane rolled past the window. Forgotten. They didn't take the flight. Claire canceled it quietly with a single look toward the agent at the gate. No fanfare. No rebooking. Just the quiet surrender of a plan that no longer made sense. She had spent years living by itinerary, strategic timelines, investor calls, international hotel suites, but this moment at Gate 22 with 2 sets of hands folded into hers was the only appointment that had ever really mattered. Back in the cab, Liam sat between them, knees bouncing. "I thought we'd have to run faster," he said seriously, "like in the movies." Claire smiled. "You mean we didn't look cool enough? You looked like you were about to faint," he told his dad. Ethan laughed, an unguarded, open laugh that filled the quiet space around them. Claire turned her face slightly toward the window, blinking hard. Not because she was sad, but because something in her chest, long frozen, was starting to thaw. When they arrived at Ethan's apartment, Claire hesitated outside the door. She'd been here once, but now it felt different. More real. Less borrowed. like she had earned the right to step inside, but only if she still wanted to. Ethan caught her pause. "You okay?" Claire nodded, then looked up at him. "I don't want to force my way in." "You're not," he said softly. "You're being asked in." She looked at Liam, who grinned and whispered, "We saved your spot." That did it. She stepped inside. The apartment was simple, but lived in, not picture-perfect. A stack of clean laundry waited to be folded. Liam's toys were tucked into corners in soft rebellion against tidiness. There were family photos on the wall, Ethan with a much younger Liam, his late wife smiling from an old picture frame sunlight caught in her curls. Claire took a slow breath. She wasn't replacing anyone. She wasn't erasing anything. She was being invited into something already good, just ready for more. Ethan brought her tea and sat beside her on the worn couch. The silence between them was no longer awkward, it was full, soft, heavy in a beautiful way. "You know," he said, after a long pause, "I always thought I was protecting Liam from pain by keeping people out." Claire turned toward him. "But the truth is," he continued, "I was protecting myself. From hope. From the kind of hope that doesn't come with guarantees." "I know that kind," Claire said quietly. "It's the kind that's only real when it's not promised." They looked at each other. No more explaining. Just truth. Quiet and mutual. "I missed you the second you left," Ethan admitted. "And I didn't even know I had the right to miss you." Claire smiled. "You didn't need permission." That night, Liam insisted they all bake something together. Claire offered suggestions, banana bread sugar cookies, but Liam had already decided. "Upside-down pineapple cake," he announced. Ethan blinked. "We've never made that. I saw it on TV. It looks happy." So they tried. They spilled flour, burned the first attempt, laughed so hard that Claire had to sit down at one point, tears of joy streaking her cheeks. Ethan stood at the stove with his arm around her shoulders as she wiped her eyes. Liam decorated the second cake with pineapple slices that looked like lopsided suns. "It's kind of perfect," he declared. Claire took a picture of the three of them holding the cake, Liam in the middle, beaming. It wasn't glossy, it wasn't curated, but it was real. And in that photo there was no emptiness, no missing piece, just wholeness. Later, when Liam had fallen asleep on the couch, Ethan carried him gently to bed. Claire followed, pausing at the door as Ethan tucked the blanket around his son's shoulders and kissed his forehead. He turned to find Claire watching. "He's lucky," she whispered. Ethan smiled. "I think I'm the lucky one." They returned to the living room. The apartment felt warm, more like a home than any place Claire had lived in years. She stood by the window, gazing out at the night. "I used to believe healing looked like forgetting," she said softly. "That to move forward you had to leave everything behind." Ethan joined her, their shoulders nearly touching. "And now?" he asked. She turned, eyes gleaming. "Now, I think healing looks like this. Letting what hurt you shape you, but not close you." Ethan reached for her hand. This time she didn't hesitate. "I'm still scared," he admitted. "So am I. But I think I want to be scared with you." Her smile was small but radiant. "Then that makes two of us who are finally brave." He leaned in, slow, careful. Their foreheads touched, a breath shared, and in the quiet of that night, without declarations or fireworks, something sacred unfolded. Not the beginning of love, but the return to it. In another room, Liam stirred in his sleep, unaware that just down the hall his world had quietly rearranged itself into something even better. Not perfect, but true, and for the first time in a long time, the air between all three of them felt like it was finally full of promise. 3 months later, the wind had turned cold again in Manhattan, curling through the streets with the sharp promise of winter. But inside the small apartment above 86th Street, warmth danced in the air, laughter, the smell of cinnamon, the soft rustling of paper-wrapped presents being sneakily hidden in closets Liam wasn't supposed to open. The holidays were coming. Claire stood by the kitchen counter wearing one of Ethan's flannel shirts over leggings, her hair tied in a loose knot as she carefully placed handwritten tags on gifts. She didn't rush. She liked this part, the quiet, choosing the deliberate gesture. Nothing bought in a panic. Nothing hollow. In the living room, Liam was sprawled out with construction paper and markers working on a card for his Christmas homework hero, a new title he'd invented for Claire just that morning. Ethan entered from the hallway rubbing his hands together to fight the chill. He watched them for a moment, unnoticed, the two people who had changed everything. "Okay," he said. "The tree lights are officially fixed." Again. Claire looked up and smiled. "I told you to stop letting Liam plug in every toy spaceship at once." Liam grinned. "They need backup power." Ethan shook his head in mock despair. "One day, you'll learn about energy bills." Claire crossed the kitchen and wrapped her arms around him. "Until then, we have backup love." He blinked. "That was corny. I stand by it." They both laughed, and for a moment time slowed. There had been 1,000 little moments like this over the past few months, cups of coffee shared before school drop-off dinners made side-by-side bedtime stories told by two voices instead of one. But none of it had been rushed or forced. It had been chosen, day by day, and that was what made it real. Later that night, snow began to fall. It started gently, just a few flurries tapping against the window before blooming into soft waves that blurred the edges of the city and made even the sirens sound distant. Claire and Ethan stood together by the window mugs of tea, warming their hands. "You know," she said, leaning into his shoulder, "I used to think love was supposed to be grand. Some big movie scene, a kiss in the rain, fireworks, applause." Ethan chuckled. "And now I think love is when someone remembers how you take your tea, or saves you the last bite of pie without saying anything, or watches the snowfall with you like it's the first time." He looked at her. "So, we're not getting applause." Claire shrugged. "We got Liam." "That's better." Across the room, Liam was curled up on the couch, head resting on a pillow, a book half finished in his hands. He'd insisted on staying up to see the snow, but the warmth had gotten to him first. Ethan stepped forward, lifted his son gently into his arms, and carried him to bed. Claire followed, tucking the blankets over Liam's shoulders. As she leaned in to kiss his forehead, Liam stirred slightly. "You're staying right," he murmured. Claire looked at Ethan. Their eyes met, and in that glance was everything what they had feared, what they had fought, and what they had finally found. "I'm staying," Claire whispered. Liam's lips curled into a sleepy smile before he drifted back under. Back in the living room, Ethan lit a small candle on the windowsill. It had become their ritual. One light every night, like a quiet way of saying, "We're here." Claire joined him, slipping her hand into his. "Do you ever wonder how different things would have been?" She asked if we hadn't met again that day at the airport. Ethan nodded. "All the time." "Do you regret anything?" He shook his head slowly. "No, because every scar, every wrong turn, every year I spent afraid, brought me right back to you." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You know," he added, "you still never explained what you were doing at JFK that day. You didn't have a reservation. You just showed up." Claire smiled. "I was supposed to be on a flight to London for a summit. But that morning, I woke up and couldn't go. I kept thinking about that night in the hospital, about how I never said thank you. I got in a car without a plan. I just needed to find you." Ethan looked at her for a long time. Then he said quietly, "Thank you for showing up." They stood there watching the snow coat the world in stillness. In the corner of the apartment, next to the bookshelf, was a framed picture, three people hand in hand beneath a crooked sun, drawn in crayon on faded paper. Beneath it, written in Liam's blocky handwriting, "Our family." The long way home. And above them, in tiny lettering, Claire had added, "One night love doesn't always arrive on time, but it always finds its way." Outside, the city kept moving. But inside that small apartment there was light. Not loud, not dazzling, but steady, like the kind of light you leave on when someone you love is trying to find their way home. And this time, they had. We'd love to know where are you watching from. Share your city or country in the comments below. It's always heartwarming to see how these stories connect with people all over the world. And if this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another inspiring moment.